He was the man no one expected, the bat no one saw coming, and the mystery no one has ever fully explained. In the summer of 1961, when all of America was watching Roger Maris chase Babe Ruth's record, a left-handed hitter in Detroit quietly crafted one of the most astonishing offensive seasons in American League history. His name was Norm Cash, a player who stepped into the box with a grin on his face, a stance that looked almost too relaxed, and a swing that could detonate a baseball into the upper deck before anyone realized what had happened. That year, he didn't just hit well, he hit like a man possessed. A .361 batting average, 41 home runs, and a level of dominance that felt almost supernatural. For a brief moment, he wasn't just a good player. He was the best hitter in the league. And yet somehow, Norm Cash never became a household name. His brilliance faded into the shadows of larger legends, lost behind louder headlines and buried under the weight of baseball's most mythic season. Today, many fans know Maris, they know Mantle, they know the story of 1961. But Norm Cash, the man who out-hit all of them, his story drifted away, the same way he did decades later on a quiet night in the waters of Lake Michigan. Before we dive deeper into his journey, his rise, his joy, and the lonely tragedy that ended his life, let me ask you, how does a man who hit 377 home runs vanish from the collective memory of baseball? Norm Cash was born in the small town of Justisburg, Texas, a place where the wind never seemed to stop blowing, where baseball fields were patches of uneven dirt, and where kids learned early that nothing in life came easily. His family lived a modest, hard-working life. His father labored long hours, his mother kept the home steady, and young Norm grew up understanding that effort was not optional. It was survival. He wasn't a prodigy. He wasn't the kid everyone pointed to and said, "That one's going to be a star." Instead, he was restless, curious, and full of a charm that made him impossible to ignore. He spent his childhood sprinting across dusty lots, hitting rocks with broom handles, and improvising baseball games with anything he could get his hands on. And even then, there was something different about him. Not greatness, but freedom. He played with a looseness and joy that would later define his entire career. The Texas heat shaped him, the ruggedness of the land toughened him, and the small-town life taught him humility, gratitude, and resilience. Baseball wasn't a dream yet. It was just a way to escape the silence of long afternoons, a way to feel alive. School coaches noticed his raw athleticism, but Norm Cash never behaved like someone chasing attention. He played because it felt right, because the game matched his personality, unpredictable, loud, funny, and impossible to contain. Friends would later say that even as a teenager, he walked with the swagger of someone who didn't take life too seriously, and that this attitude would be both his greatest gift and his greatest curse. Before long, the boy from Justisburg outgrew the sandlots. His natural swing, his surprising strength, and his instinctive feel for timing caught the eye of people who knew baseball far better than he did. And without realizing it, Norm Cash was stepping onto a path that would take him far from Texas, far from home, and deep into the demanding world of professional baseball. Norm Cash's road to the major leagues wasn't a clean, heroic climb. It was messy, uncertain, and filled with the kind of struggles that make or break a young athlete. His first real opportunity came when scouts noticed his effortless power. Not polished, not refined, but undeniably real. The Chicago White Sox took a chance on him, signing him to a modest contract that felt unreal to a kid who had been hitting rocks in Texas just a few years earlier. Life in the minor leagues quickly stripped away any illusions he may have carried. Long bus rides across the country, cheap motels, nights spent staring at the ceiling, wondering if he truly belonged. This was the real education. He wasn't a star here. He wasn't even close. He struck out too much. He made mistakes. Some days he looked unstoppable, and other days he looked lost. But he kept showing up, kept swinging, kept laughing through the pressure in a way only Norm Cash could. Teammates remembered him as the guy who could lighten a locker room simply by walking in. But beneath the humor was real determination. He worked on his timing, shortened his swing, and learned to read pitchers with increasing precision. Slowly, the wild power began to take shape. Slowly, the kid from Texas started to become a professional hitter. His call up to the major leagues wasn't surrounded by hype. There were no headlines, no expectations. When he debuted with the White Sox, he blended into the background. Another rookie trying to survive in a league where legends roamed the infields and outfields. His early numbers were unremarkable, but his presence, that was different. Coaches saw raw force. Pitchers noticed the ball jumping off his bat with a sound you didn't forget. In 1960, a pivotal trade sent him to the Detroit Tigers, a shift that would change everything. What seemed like a routine transaction became the turning point of his entire life. Detroit was where he would find his swing, his identity, and eventually his immortality. He arrived as a player with potential. He was about to become something far more dangerous. Nothing in Norm Cash's early seasons suggested what was coming. He had power, yes, flashes of it, but nothing close to historic. Then came 1961, a year that would redefine not only his career, but the way people understood unpredictability in baseball. While the nation's eyes were locked on the home run race between Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle, something extraordinary was brewing quietly in Detroit. Norm Cash walked into that season with a transformed mindset and a swing that suddenly felt like it belonged to a different player entirely. Everything connected, everything carried. He saw pitches early, read them cleanly, and punished mistakes with a violence that stunned pitchers across the league. Overnight, he went from a solid hitter to a force of nature. By mid-season, whispers had already begun. How was Cash hitting this well? How was he spraying line drives into every corner of the park? How was he maintaining that impossible batting average? Opposing managers adjusted their pitching strategies. Teams shifted their defenses. Nothing worked. The baseball world realized it wasn't a hot streak. It was a phenomenon. When the summer ended, Norm Cash stood at 361. Not Mantle, not Maris, Norm Cash. A number so outrageous that it remains to this day one of the most shocking batting averages of the modern era. Add 41 home runs, 132 walks, a .487 on-base percentage, and a league-leading 1.148 OPS, and you have a season that appeared to break the laws of baseball logic. And yet Cash carried it with humor. When reporters pressed him about the secret behind his success, he shrugged it off with a grin, saying it was just one of those years where everything fell into place. Fans loved him for that. He didn't boast, he didn't posture. He played freely, joyfully, like someone who couldn't quite believe what was happening either. That season turned him into a star, but it also created a mystery that would follow him for the rest of his life. Was Norm Cash truly this good? Or was 1961 the most beautiful anomaly baseball has ever seen? If 1961 was the explosion, then the years that followed were the long, steady burn that proved Norm Cash was far more than a one-season miracle. Detroit embraced him, and he in return became one of the most consistent and entertaining power hitters of the 1960s. While he never again reached the impossible heights of his 361 season, he settled into a role that made him indispensable to the Tigers. A left-handed bat with unmistakable pop and a personality that electrified the clubhouse. Throughout the mid-60s, Cash delivered season after season of solid production, typically around 20 to 30 home runs, an on-base percentage that consistently hovered above league average, and a knack for delivering in big moments. Pitchers never enjoyed facing him. His stance looked deceptively relaxed, but the bat came through the zone with unexpected force, producing line drives that screamed into right field or towering shots that disappeared over the upper deck. He had become a master of timing, turning pitchers' mistakes into souvenirs for the Detroit faithful. But what truly defined his peak wasn't just numbers. It was presence. Cash played with an energy that pulled teammates together. Jokes, pranks, laughter. He was the spirit of the clubhouse. Even all-stars respected him not just for the home runs, but for the swagger he carried without arrogance. Norm Cash was the rare athlete who played the game with skill and personality in equal measure. Then came 1968, a season etched forever into Detroit history. The Tigers marched toward a World Series championship, and Cash played an essential role. He didn't post record-breaking numbers, but he delivered when it mattered most. His leadership steadied the team during moments of crisis, and his bat provided clutch hits during the pennant chase. In the Fall Classic, he battled fiercely against the dominant St. Louis Cardinals pitching staff, contributing timely offense that helped Detroit complete their unforgettable comeback from a 3-1 series deficit. Even opponents praised him. Pitchers admitted he was one of the toughest outs in the league because he never looked intimidated. Teammates said he lifted them simply by being himself. In a sport obsessed with statistics, Norm Cash's impact went beyond the box score. He made the game feel fun, even under pressure. Through the second half of the 1960s and into the early 1970s, Cash remained the same steady, dangerous hitter Detroit depended on. Seasons rose and fell, teammates came and went. But Norm Cash stood firm, a reliable source of power, patience, and unmistakable charisma. He had become, quietly but undeniably, a foundational pillar of Tigers baseball. As the 1970s arrived, the same game that had lifted Norm Cash into stardom began to turn against him. Age crept in quietly at first, a split-second slower reaction, a swing that didn't quite catch the inside fastball, a nagging soreness that lingered longer than before. He was still productive, still dangerous, but the gap between who he was and who he had been grew wider each season. Pitchers adapted. Velocity across the league climbed. Breaking balls became sharper. Scouting reports more sophisticated. Cash, with his naturally aggressive style, sometimes struggled to adjust. The effortless timing that defined his prime began to flicker. He battled slumps, stretches where nothing seemed to fall, and criticism from those who believed his career peak had been little more than a statistical anomaly. For a man who loved the game with such freedom, the weight of expectation felt heavier now. Detroit still admired him deeply, but even admiration cannot stop time. By the mid-70s, he transitioned into more of a veteran presence, a role model for younger players, the comic heart of the locker room, and a reminder of the Tigers' glory years. Yet on the field, his numbers faded, and eventually the inevitable happened. His release from the team marked the end of an era, closing a chapter on a career that had delivered far more joy than baseball ever gave him credit for. Life after baseball was quieter. Cash remained beloved in Detroit, often appearing at alumni events and connecting with fans who still remembered the magic of 1961 and the fire of the 1968 championship run. But away from the stadium lights, he wrestled with the emptiness that many retired athletes face. A search for purpose after the cheers fade. Then came the night that changed everything. In October of 1986, Norm Cash was alone on his boat off Beaver Island in Lake Michigan. What happened remains uncertain. Authorities believe he slipped while trying to board the vessel, falling into the cold water. He never resurfaced. At just 51 years old, one of baseball's most joyful spirits was gone. There was no farewell tour, no final ovation, just silence. A silence almost as shocking as his greatest season, and far more painful. The man who played with laughter left the world quietly. When people look back at baseball history, certain names dominate the conversation: Ruth, Mays, Mantle, Aaron. But woven between those titanic figures are players like Norm Cash, whose impact cannot be measured by fame alone. His 307 home runs, his on-base ability, his defensive steadiness at first base, all of it forms a resume strong enough to stand among the great hitters of his era. And yet his legacy is richer, deeper, and far more human than any statistical summary. Cash represented something rare, a player who reminded you that the sport could still be joyful. He swung with confidence but never with ego. He hit towering home runs, then cracked a joke rounding first base. He struck out and shrugged it off with a smile. He played the game with a spirit that felt unfiltered. The same loose, playful energy he had as a boy in Justisburg, hitting rocks with a broom handle. His teammates adored him. Opponents respected him. Fans connected to him not because he was perfect, but because he was real. There was no persona, no polished image. Norm Cash lived openly, laughed loudly, and played baseball like a man who understood that none of it was guaranteed. Perhaps that is why his story still resonates for those who look closely enough to find it. Statistically, he belongs in the conversation of the most underrated hitters of the 1960s and 1970s. From 1961 to 1973, he ranked among the league leaders in walks, power, and overall offensive value. His combination of patience and explosiveness made him a nightmare for pitchers. And for Detroit, he became a symbol of reliability, a cornerstone of one of the franchise's most beloved eras. But beyond the numbers, his legacy asks a deeper question. How should we remember an athlete whose greatness did not always demand the spotlight? Was Norm Cash a superstar overshadowed by legends? Or was he something else entirely? A reminder that baseball's most beautiful stories often belong to the men who never asked for attention, but earned it all the same. Today, when fans reflect on the Tigers of the 1960s, they may first recall Al Killeen's elegance or Denny McLain's brilliance. But listen closely, and you'll hear something more subtle. The laughter in the dugout, the bond among teammates, the heartbeat of a team, that was Norm Cash. The joy, the soul, the spark that made the game feel alive. His numbers ensured he'll never be forgotten by historians. His spirit ensured he'll never be forgotten by those who truly knew the game. In the end, Norm Cash's story is not just about home runs or batting titles. It is about a man who played baseball the way most of us dream of living life. With laughter, with courage, and with the understanding that even the brightest moments can be fleeting. His .361 season in 1961 will forever stand as one of the sport's great marvels, a reminder that greatness sometimes comes from the players we least expect. And his role in helping Detroit capture the 1968 championship ensures that his name will always echo through the history of Tigers baseball. But beyond the statistics, beyond the trophies, lies a deeper truth. Cash showed us that the beauty of the game isn't found only in records. It's found in the humanity of those who play it. In his swing, we saw power. In his personality, we saw joy. In his journey, we saw resilience. And in his quiet exit from the world, we were reminded of how fragile even the strongest spirits can be. As we look back at his life, perhaps the real question isn't why Norm Cash was forgotten by many, but how anyone could overlook a story so full of heart. Maybe his legacy isn't measured by how loudly it's remembered, but by how deeply it touches those who take the time to remember it. While you're here, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you believe Norm Cash deserves to be recognized as one of the most underrated hitters of his era? And if you grew up watching him play, what memories do you carry with you? If you'd like to continue celebrating the legends who shaped the spirit of baseball, make sure to like this video, share your memories in the comments, and explore the related stories we've linked at the end. There are countless forgotten heroes waiting to be rediscovered, and together we'll bring their stories back to life.